Kim Young sighed in relief as she finally reached the last floor of a troublesome tower. Soon the gates of the 100th floor opened and a blinding light flooded from inside. The difficulty level of the tower rose with every elevating floor, and humans who were already pathetically weak continued to climb it. For this reason, 7 hunters lost their lives. Everyone, including Young, had a team of guild members who helped them with the strenuous adventure. But like always, everyone died, with the only survivor being the last S-class hunter, namely Young. A smirk appeared on her face as Kim Young gazed at the battered and burnt bodies of her colleagues. Kim turned around when one of her presumed dead colleagues called her out. Immediately, Kim was frozen to the ground. With a malicious, bloodshot glare, Kim warned him not to call her name with that body. Kim knew that it was the master of the tower who had possessed the corpse of her dead colleague. With a sinister smile, the master of the tower stared at Kim with a fanged serpent emerging from his body and activated a skill, Master of the Tower Floor 33 Implement Fear. He raised his hand and a bunch of hissing serpents wrapped around it were instantly released, charging toward Kim. Quite agile, Kim immediately jumped off, successfully dodging the serpent attack, while the serpents sickeningly crashed to the ground. Deadlier than hell, the ferocious serpents were struck with a powerful magical spell. Kim knew that she would die if she lost at this point against the slithering reptiles. Gallantly, Kim charged toward them carrying a sword and activating a skill called Shroud of the Morning Wave. With a quick slash, she managed to slice a serpent into 2 halves, thinking that she couldn't go through something perilous like that. She meant by repetitively dying, reincarnating, and then climbing the tower that seemed like a never-ending cat and mouse chase game of life and death. Kim stood on the edge of the door to the last floor with a trail of gore down the winding stairs, pondering that she was too exhausted to restart from the bottom of the tower. In sheer frustration, she gritted her teeth as she had been through this cycle 58 times. She had even memorized certain attack patterns, once while fighting some ferocious horned hounds on level 66, which had activated the Master of Tower skill Implementing Fear. In one fiery incident, while tackling some horrendous dragons that had activated the skill Asmodeus' Snare, scathing everything within their range, Kim uses a lasso loop to capture them. On the 99th floor, an eerie creature that had eyes all over its body was about to attack when Kim used a skill called Dagger Barrage to toss hundreds of daggers all at once to the monster. Kim had memorized the attack patterns of the Master of the Tower to the point that she envisioned them in her dreams. It seemed as if many constellations challenged her at various points. So thrusting the mighty sword, Kim charged toward the master fiercely, as all she wanted was to return home. Kim Young slashed at the disguised master of the tower and managed to toss him to the ground. Next, the flabbergasted master was shackled in thick iron chains. With a helpless look in his eyes, the master let out a desperate cry for Young. Finally, Young plunged her sword into the deteriorating master of the tower. With utter despise, she cried at him that the body he had occupied was already lifeless. Menacingly, she drove him out of her life. In no time, the body vanished without leaving any traces. A bewildered Young looked here and there. She pondered in disbelief whether she had actually killed him. Young was stunned when the system notified her that the ruler of the final floor, called the Master of the Tower, had been destroyed. When the system further informed her that she had met the conditions to fulfill the epic quest, Young kept on repeating to herself skeptically that the worst nightmare was over. Young felt that then she should have remembered that it was not over till everything had ended completely. Kim was startled when a glob of jello yelped in agony that it actually lost to a human. The jello-faced Joker cried that his grand plan wasn't finished yet. However, an indifferent Kim was slightly relieved because a plan like taking over the world was not ideal. Asuka's mind was correctly deciphered by Young. The jello face fumed over because she reminded him that whatever he was thinking was not very creative. Kim was notified that King of Waves and Healing was not very happy since she was returning to her home. Also, Vicious Bloodlord was now in tears, so Kim wondered why he was shedding so many tears since it was time to depart after years of companionship. Lord of Temptation scolded Kim for talking about separation, and Kim retorted that they were old and she must go home now. A warm smile appeared on Kim's face when she remembered her pet dog Cerberus anxiously awaited her return, but she was informed that her dog wouldn't miss her absence. Kim protested that even though she would return to her original time, she was the one desperately waiting for her return and was dying to meet her dog. So when the master of the tower ominously warned her of revenge, Kim aloofly shunned him for his clinginess, proposing to challenge the writer's lack of creativity. Wrathfully, the master of the tower rose to his full height, threatening Kim that he would destroy her strongest wish since she demolished his dream. Gallantly, Kim slashed her sword around the villain. Then she crushed him mercilessly under her boot, declaring that he must die if he was meant to instead of cursing her. Angrily, she kept on slopping on the globe of jello-like squash yoga ball adamant to kill that tyrant, since he had destroyed many lives and dreams, while falsely crying on his useless one. Out of the blue, two slithering tentacles emerged from the hideous jello, circling around an alarmed Kim. Hideously, that blob of jello let out a menacing chortle, pulling Kim closer to him, claiming that in her next life, his wish would come true and she would stay there forever. The lewd scene was not taken well by the three constellations, who cursed and condemned the master of the tower, and Kim triumphantly managed to slay him, thus clearing the quest. The system released a chain of flattering remarks, as the King of Ways and Healing was a big fan of Kim's wisdom. Lord of Temptation offered to make her dream of more puppies frequently. Vicious Bloodlord went beyond lengths by proposing to become a dog for her, and all of this buttering made Kim really mad, as she reminded Grandpa of his age. When he was called a grandpa by Kim, the vicious Bloodlord was very upset and revolted that he was not a grandpa since he was a half-blood. In a shocking revelation, Kim revealed that even she was over 500 years. Frantically giving up on her, the vicious Bloodlord turned around, instructing Kim to clear her quest and receive her reward quickly. For the first time, Kim concurred with him, so she sat down comfortably, opened the quest window, and commanded it to clear her reward swiftly. To her dismay, the system displayed an emergency notice that it had encountered an error and was being under repair, and then it offered its deepest gratitude for the user's patience. Kim wasn't expecting that, since it was the first time she was facing such a breakdown in the system. In a jittery voice, she instructed for the status window to appear. However, nothing happened, so Kim was about to have an attack as she fretted over being compensated. But all went in vain, since the system refused to budge as it flashed the same message that it was being patched down. Kim screamed, hysterically demanding to be rewarded or sent back, and the system replied by giving her a fun tip that the more S-class hunters regressed, the stronger they became. Her eyes became hazy with anxiety as she saw a system notice that the next work of the author of S-class hunters gets stronger as they regress had been released. Everything got blurry for Kim when the system offered to play What If an S-class hunter becomes the daughter of the villainous Duke currently. Kim wondered about the sleazy title of the next project. While she was still lost in her thoughts, the system notified a startled Kim that the patch-up was complete. Kim was informed that a new quest had been formed. Also, she was congratulated since she successfully cleared the epic quest. Kim sighed in relief as she nearly had a heart attack until the system notified her that the contents of the reward would change due to system error. All blood was drained from Kim's face on that last notification. Another window popped up indicating that Kim's previous reward was sending her back to her own world, but now she would be reincarnated as the main character of another novel. Kim was perplexed because she didn't know what reincarnation meant. Another message popped up apologizing to Kim that due to an error, it would be impossible to give her the promised reward that was to send her back to her own world. But she was assured that a better reward had been planned for her. Kim would now occupy the main character of the next project, What If an S-class becomes the daughter of a villainous duke. The system was certain that Kim would be content due to that intriguing novel. Wrathfully, Kim grabbed her sword and demanded to see the manager of the system. Nonchalantly, the system instructed her to enjoy her role. In a hysterical mode, Kim thrust her sword and yelled again to call the manager. When the system began to load another window, Kim tried to slash it with her sword, but there was a blinding flash of lightning. All her endeavors went in vain since the system had already started to begin the possession process. Soon, Kim Lai-young was introduced as an S-class hunter, ruler of the last floor, and a returner who destroyed the master of the tower. In reality, she was possessed by a fantasy novel called The More an S-class hunter returns, the stronger he becomes. On a fateful day when she took the civil service exam in Korea, after studying for 4 years and 7 months, she finally passed and went out to celebrate. Unfortunately, she was hit by a car and then died instantly. But she reincarnated in a novel that she had read 4 years and 7 months earlier. At first, she thought it would be fun to be an S-class hunter. She was affiliated with the Korea Guild, having many titles like the Last S-Class Hunter, Munchkin Protagonist, etc. Kim was able to beat all the dungeons due to her previous knowledge of the novel. She had an infinite length of strength, agility, stamina, and wisdom, and the highest possible luck. With utmost capability, she took the first, second, and third constellations and signed a contract with them. King of Ways and Healing being the first vicious blood lord, the second, while the Lord of Temptation was the third. Still, Yi Young had never been able to beat the final boss of the tower. As the master of the tower, who was the dark and final boss of the possessed novel, was too strong. He had no weaknesses, and his attack patterns were so diverse that no proper strategy could be formed. Also, Kim hadn't finished reading the novel, so she didn't know how to clear it. Still, she managed to clear it by using the final boss strategy after 58 returns. After a while, a blue-eyed and silver-haired woman opened her eyes inquisitively. Along with her, even the vicious Bloodlord also wondered in perplexity about their whereabouts. It appeared as if Kim had already reincarnated into her new avatar wearing age-old clothes. The King of Ways and Healing, who had also tagged along, was also confused. Meanwhile, the Lord of Temptation was delighted with the world he was already familiar with. Kim Li-young was not very pleased, since she wanted to return home after undergoing so many deaths. However, here she was trapped in another body in some other fantasy novel. She squirmed her face in sheer frustration, as she had never even read that novel before. Wrathfully, she summoned the quest window. She was informed that she had possessed Renee Marcus, the famous daughter of the greatest warrior of the Ramoisha Empire and the worst villain, Duke Marquis. A subquest had been assigned to her to escape a dungeon at all costs, where she was locked in a false accusation of murdering Saint Leon Charis and hiding her body. Kim was relieved that at least she could get some idea of the novel from the quest window, and it seemed as if she had possessed some romantic fantasy novel. However, Kim was never a fan of romantic whims, as she was mostly attracted to physical appearances. She observed her clean hands without any calluses and summoned a status window that showed all her adjusting stats. Her contracts with the 3 constellations were still intact, but the levels of their respective skills were still in the adjustable mode. Kim was shocked because every time she accessed the system earlier, it always had a perfect structure. Everything would have been so detailed that she felt that it was all arranged for her, and now the system was showing such liberty. It might be that this whole possession thing was pre-planned. Having an anxious expression with slight traces of fury, Kim suspected that it was the prank play by that wretched Tower Master. Basically, when the Tower Master left cursing her, that actually caused a breakthrough error in the system. With utmost courage, she gathered up her skirts, thinking of completing the quest, since there was no point in crying over spilled milk. Kim was hopeful that if she got out of that dungeon, then she might be able to escape from that possession. Firstly, she decided to experiment with her abilities, so her sidekick constellations chipped in with their respective suggestions, but she wondered why the Lord of Temptation was so excited. So she addressed him as Grandpa to remind him of his position and inquired about some information from that world. However, Grandpa didn't seem very pleased. Nevertheless, he mentioned that this world was connected to his homeland, the demon world. Slightly disappointed by the author's cheesy creativity level, Kim Yi-young guessed that she was not in a typical romance fantasy world. Secretly marveling at her princess outfit, a stern-faced Kim instructed her 3 companions to check their abilities and wondered whether anyone had undergone any change. Vicious Blood Lord informed her that he had gone from being able to divide continents to being able to divide mountains. According to the Lord of Temptation, his abilities were worse than the demon world, but certainly better than the previous world. King of Ways and Healing was worried, since he felt that his abilities decreased quite significantly. When Kim probed him further, the first constellation replied that his water resurrection skill couldn't be used, but Kim wasn't worried, since she didn't use that in her previous life anyway. All her 3 constellations nodded in affirmation. Hesitantly, Kim grabbed the iron bars, thinking that her abilities were the same, although they were slightly weakened. The only thing she had to worry about was her level, and with a mighty tug, she pulled over the bars. With superwoman strength, she pulled them out along with the huge chunk of rocky ground on which they were firmly plunged. Entirely astonished by her supernatural strength as she folded the iron bars like some rubber pipes, Kim knew she didn't have to worry too much. Ramwesha's empire's greatest swordsman was known as the Iron-Blooded Marquis. He was the nation's only duke who rose to fame for his high-quality swordsmanship. The Marquis family that consistently defeated numerous sword masters in the past century was facing the danger of a downfall. This was because the nation's only saintess and the crown prince's fiancée, Lion Charis, who was also the daughter of a count, had gone missing on the border of the Marquis duchy. Lian went missing, leaving behind her shoes and a holy book. All suspicions were on the abandoned daughter of the duke and the nation's worst villain, Renee Marquis, who was also termed the shame of the Marquis. Currently, a group of people were informed that there had been an attack on the basement prison, most probably referring to Kim Wai-young's recent jailbreak. One of them was the heir of the Marquis Kingdom, named Ant Marquis, who commanded his troop to organize an attack position. He warned everyone that the attacker was strong with unnatural energy, but the good news was that they had to face just one enemy, and the warning surely panicked his brother Kirill Marquis. They all gathered at the basement entrance, where Ant instructed everyone to attack when he signaled. Soon he began to count. He positioned his sword on the count of 2. As soon as he counted to 3, a feminine voice echoed in the darkness of the basement, disgusted by its stench, and soon a pair of female feet under a white skirt was visible. A panic-stricken Kirill broke into a huge grin of relief when he recognized a familiar voice. It was none other than Renee Marquis, who greeted them with a big smile and pretended to be astonished to see a lot of people. Both the Marquis brothers were stupefied to see a cheerful Renee aka Kim Wai-young emerging from the basement carrying a long iron bar. After a while at a tea table, a furious Ant probed Renee about the person who helped her escape from the prison, and she explained that she was the one who broke that shabby prison. Renee was getting frustrated from being asked the same question for the zillionth time as time was flying, and she had to complete her quests. Ant was not satisfied and rolled at the top of his lungs that he felt a strange kind of energy, and Renee must immediately spill out the name of the crook. He kept on grilling her about whether the crook killed Miss Charis and whether she incited that person to do so. However, a thoughtful Kim sensed something bizarre. Seeing her spaced out, Ant probed Kim whether she was attentive to him, while Kim was busy analyzing his strange stats. Kirill chipped in while munching on a cookie that Renee was obviously not paying attention to Ant. Meanwhile, Kim was busy analyzing his undecipherable stats as well. Kim was flustered on sensing that she was not at all favored despite the broken stat window, as she was hoping to find an environment where the youngest one was the apple of the eye. She was informed by the system that she successfully cleared the subquest escape and her fame had increased by 20 points. Kim awaited the next subquest. For the next subquest, she had to build an amicable relationship with her 2 older brothers for a good future, and for the reward she would get a fully repaired status window. Another subquest titled Clarification was also received, as Kim was under a false accusation of murdering Lion Charis, so she had to prove her innocence to someone for 30 fame points. Both Ant and Kirill were puzzled when Kim let out a sarcastic sigh, as she had to overcome the impossibility of winning over her austere brothers and elevating her rock-bottom fame. Instantly, Kim pasted a sugary smile on her face, thanking those 2 diffusers for worrying about her, as she had to earn their favorability under all adverse circumstances. Scornfully, Ant mentioned that Kim might have lost her marbles for thinking that they were fretting over her, while Kirill reminded him that ocean floor prison would have been safer. Deciding to give up on those loonies, Kim protested that she didn't have the slightest idea about the real situation. She argued about the reason she would have killed Lion Charis. Her indifferent attitude ignited sheer wrath within Ant, who banged the table so hard, smashing the teacups, spilling the hot tea, and accused Kim of constantly jabbering about killing Lian. He screamed that as soon as she was missing from their territory, everyone blamed Kim, and they didn't know if they would be able to revive their family's honor, even if she confessed. Kirill tried to pacify Ant's anger, as hurting Kim meant upsetting their father, but Ant didn't stop and kept on chiding her for escaping from isolation and bringing dishonor to the family. There was an ominous silence, only to be broken by the chill voice of Kim, who said she understood whatever he rambled. Then she threw a $1 million question about the evidence of the accusation and whether the body was ever found. However, Aunt blamed her for confidently hiding both. Nonchalantly, Kim declared that then there was no evidence, and her remark shot up Aunt's blood pressure, so Carol explained that she was the main suspect, despite no clear evidence. A considerably pacified Aunt agreed with Carol that it was difficult to hold up a grudge against Miss Charis. Helplessly, he hid his face in shame, proclaiming that if it weren't Kim, then who would have killed such an innocent person? A flowery image of Lion Charis danced in Aunt's mind, calling out his name sunnily. After a spell of uncomfortable silence, Aunt tried one more time to coax Kim into confessing her crime and blurting out the body's location so that the Crown Prince would free her from guilt by association. Aunt abashed her by informing her that their father even went to the Imperial Palace to save their reputation, but Kim was pondering why the Crown Prince and not the king was involved. She voiced her concerns when Aunt seriously thought she had injured her head, but he still informed her that the Crown Prince was in charge of the case. Kim's face broke into a cryptic smile when Aunt pointed out that he hoped she was not in a delusion that the Crown Prince liked her. Aunt reminded her that it had been 3 years since the prince got engaged to Leon. Even Carol chipped in that she shouldn't embarrass their family with that humiliating one-sided love. Instantly, Kim got the true picture of the probable love triangle. Kim pondered that Renee loved the prince so much that she attempted to murder Leon many times and then succeeded this time. The novel's plot was too obvious, and that's why Kim didn't even need to figure out the plan. Still, a piece of the puzzle was missing, as it was mentioned in the quest window that Renee was under a false accusation. This meant that she was not the murderer. She was sure that although a system had no conscience or shame, it never lied, as novels always portrayed the truth to the readers. However, novels intentionally conceal the truth from the readers. Kim's mind boggled to solve the question of who killed Lion Charis. After giving much thought, Kim turned to the brothers, trying to convey some general knowledge about the case, so the brothers were all ears, thinking that she was about to confess. Kim tossed an arrow in the darkness that Lion might have left the house on her own, since her body was not found, and an agitated Aunt slapped his forehead. Aunt tried to knock some sense into her mind that Lion was about to get married in a month, so it seemed quite absurd to think that she might have left on her own. Like a bolt from the blue, an excited Kim jumped from her seat when she heard the term wedding. She narrowed her crystal blue eyes, indicating that now the possibility increased. With a smirk on her face, Kim proposed that Lion might have turned into a runaway bride. Aunt frowned at Kim, proclaiming that a saintess could never do such an immoral thing. Also, he mentioned that Lion should not be compared with the likes of Kim. Kim jeered Aunt, asking how he could live with such a narrow perspective. With such a stingy heart, he wouldn't be able to strike big, and Carol, who was busy munching, had a sudden outburst. Immediately, Carol composed himself while shielding his giggles with an empty plate, and this made Aunt insecure, as he felt that Carol had better reactions than himself and he must overreact. Aunt was baffled when Kim claimed that the saintess might have suffered a lot. Kim reminded the brothers that earlier they had mentioned the kindness of the saintess. With a melancholic expression, Kim conjectured that probably the prince wasn't good enough for Leon, so she couldn't reject him to his face, and ran away. Smiling brightly, she declared that the prince should be probed first. Carol burst into a hysterical laugh on hearing such a ridiculous story, and Kim was notified that Carol's desirability increased by 10 points. Aunt warned Carol about that insane display, but Kim requested him not to accuse her like others, since he was her brother. She appealed if Aunt could trust her once. However, Aunt accused her of emotionally blackmailing him. Kim enforced that a family member should be trusted and helped at least once. Both Aunt and Carol were in an indecisive mode. Thoroughly disappointed in her aunt could have trusted her if Kim had shown even once that she was trustworthy. The Marcus family already gave a lot of chances to Kim with the trust and hoped that she would gain conscience one day. Even Kim was dumbfounded for a moment, since Aunt's allegations were true. At last, Kim requested a month to prove her innocence. Both brothers stared at her in disbelief. Aunt checked out the mess in front of him and wondered whether Kim knew what to do. Kim insisted that he must trust her once. Seeing Aunt fretting like an old dame, Kim smirked in amusement. Quite bemused, she guessed that Aunt was worried that she might turn out right. Stormily, Aunt folded his arms. At last, he agreed if she could prove her innocence, he would do anything for her in his name. Excitedly, Kim struck a deal, keeping Carol as a witness. Suddenly, a window popped up indicating that a special quest had been triggered. Instantly, Kim accepted that quest. It was termed Innocence, in which she had made a deal with Ant to prove her innocence within a month, and she would get 1 wish from Ant, while 100 points of favorability with Carol. Kim was surprised that even Carol's favorability for her would elevate. However, it struck her why she wasn't able to earn Ant's favorability. Despite knowing about his sister's innocence, Ant's favorability didn't increase. As she thrust her hand forward for a probable handshake, she wondered what Ant was hiding. Astonishingly, instead of offering his hand for a shake, Ant's hand instantly reached out to his sword, but an aloof Kim declared that she would be under Ant's care for a month. A puzzled Ant remarked acidly that she should start preparing for failure. Still, there was a grinding handshake between the two parties. Lowering her gaze, Kim thanked Ant for his concern. Awe-struck Carol noticed that something had changed about Kim. Meanwhile, Ant observed his hand thoughtfully to Carol's wonder. Ant wasn't planning for a handshake with Kim, but it seemed as if he couldn't avoid her hand. In reality, Ant, a top-tier sword expert, couldn't avoid the hands of someone who didn't even know how to use a sword. In confusion, Ant tried to feel Kim's grip in his hand. Astonishingly, he didn't feel a thing in the hand he held. Her lifeless hand was devoid of any favors or anything else. Remorsefully, he realized that a while ago he tried pulling out his sword, but Kim only held out her hand. A drop of tear rolled slowly down his smooth cheeks. As he pictured his breathtakingly beautiful sister in his mind, a perplexed Ant didn't know whether to believe in her innocence. Inside the magnificent Marcus Palace, a slightly dejected Kim sat idly wondering about her next step, as she had very little information. So she kissed the laziness goodbye and wondered whether there was someone friendly enough to provide her with the relevant information. Then she decided to get help from the maids, fluttering busily here and there. However, they were of no help since they kept on turning her down boorishly. One of them scornfully warned her not to tarnish the Duke's name further, while another one got furious for getting disturbed by useless questions. When one of the maids remarked that Kim must stay quiet if she caused an accident, Kim wondered what a wretched life Renee Marcus lived, as she was treated so shabbily. Also, no matter whom she met, her favorability was always negative. Poor Kim gave up, thinking that she just couldn't help it. Still, she grabbed the maid's hand, as she had decided to give up on getting information from the mansion. Out of frenzy, Kim ordered the maid to guide her to her room at least. Since the mansion was magnanimous, she was kind of lost. Slightly startled, the maid dropped her to her room, while a dumbfounded Kim stared at her bright and exotically furnished room. Kim was somewhat relieved as compared to the disappointing treatment she just received. The room was a lot nicer than she expected. Satisfied, she turned to an engraved wooden cupboard, as she wanted to change out of those uncomfortable and tea-stained clothes. To her amazement, the inside of the closet spoke of money and splendor, with lots of expensive decorated dresses, along with exclusively priced accessories and invaluable jewels. Kim was looking for something light and airy and was annoyed to find such pricey candy wrappers. Now she had already figured that the Duke would be wealthy, but spending exorbitantly on such useless items was outrageous. According to Kim, with that kind of bread, she could have easily bought information sources. But then she remembered that making confidence for herself was quite easy. She gathered Vicious Bloodlord's sorcery along with Lord of Temptation's skills. However, the stats were being adjusted. In her previous life, she died because the stats were released during battle, so now she needed to use her skills at the least. Kim realized that she was in a situation where she didn't know if she could kill them all like she did previously, or whether she could return from this novel like before. Kim needed to be vigilant, so she first decided to find out whether the Saintess was dead. She analyzed that there were no bodies, no evidence, and no witnesses. So nobody was certain whether she ran away or was murdered. So if the Saintess was alive, Kim could get a statement, and if she were dead, then Kim would strive to find the real culprit, and eventually, after solving the mystery, she would leave the world. Kim turned to the King of Ways and Healing to see whether the Saintess could be tracked, and the Water King affirmed that it was possible through her belongings. Vicious Bloodlord chipped in if it was sensible to just blame anyone for the crime. Feeling left out, the Lord of Temptation boasted about his expertise in this field. Kim shunned all those ideas, declaring them dangerous, since it appeared like someone here dealt with divinity, so Temptation Grandpa, who belonged to the demon world, would be caught. Shocked by that wicked nickname, Lord of Temptation was bewildered. Kim decided to leave the mansion since she wouldn't be able to get any information sources even if she spent money here. King of Ways and Healing expressed his concern about whether it would be dangerous. However, the S-class hunter who cleared the top tower was not at all intimidated. Vicious Bloodlord teased her that whoever met her was in deep danger, while the Lord of Temptation burst out in laughter at that hilarious comment. Vicious Bloodlord suggested Kim must visit the site from where the Saintess disappeared, and Kim lauded his idea, but didn't know from where the Saintess actually went missing. Vicious Bloodlord gulped at Kim's valid points, so Kim proclaimed that it was too early to give up since this was a very backward world where dog poop was used for medicine. So she decided to go to that dog poop. By dog poop, she actually meant the austere-looking Aunt Marcus and visited his office. Kim visited him to get the report on the incident and asserted that if he didn't want his family name to be tainted with blood, then he must cooperate, and her remark greatly vexed him. But then, after giving it much thought, the King of Anxiety decided to help her. However, he kept a condition for Kim to bring an escort. So Kim thoughtfully checked out the knights randomly and retorted she didn't need them, since those knights would become a burden for her. Greatly frustrated by her obstinance, Aunt insisted that a condition was a condition. Bemused, she pointed at the knights standing just behind Aunt's desk. Kim explained that since he was sending someone to keep an eye on her, it would be great if his closest associate would accompany her. To Aunt's fury, the cool gal also demanded a carriage. Soon the carriage clocked towards its destination. When it reached there, Kim stepped out of it. She looked around keenly at the border of Marcus territory, wondering if that was the place where the Saintess was last seen. As she stepped forward, followed by the close associate, she pondered about the reports that the Saintess went missing while healing patients in this poor village 10 days ago. Suddenly, someone coughed to get her attention. It was none other than the dazzling priest Melson, sternly inquiring about her presence. Checking out the lavishly dressed priest, Kim speculated that the divine dude must be living on vibes, but she wondered about that shiny book in his hand. Nonchalantly, Kim stated that she was there to catch the culprit, so they must cooperate. Meanwhile, the other priests broke into a tense chatter as they thought she was the felon. Melson was puzzled as he found out that Kim thought there was another culprit. Kim scoffed, insisting that she didn't kill the Saintess. Anxiety could be seen on the priests' faces when Kim asserted that they didn't have any evidence against her, and also they weren't authorized to investigate that case properly. Kim pasted a big smile on her face, indicating that she wanted to work together with them, while secretly she wanted to steal their information for self-investigation. Melson turned sharply at the other priests, who seemed to concur with Kim. He bellowed at Kim, expressing his skepticism toward her innocence. Her lips curved up meaningfully when she realized that just words wouldn't work with that crook. Immediately, she brought forth a chest, stating that her sincerity was doubted. Several luminous jewels and dazzling jewelry were revealed once the chest was opened, and a generous Renee aka Kim was keen to shower all those bounties on those who may be troubled. Melson's face flushed with greed as he checked out those luxurious goods. All the other priests gazed at him blankly, drooling madly over those jewels. Predictably, his tone and behavior took a U-turn as he apologized to Kim for not accepting her sincerity and readily offered his help, so Kim asked for Lion's oldest possessions. Instantly, he offered her the shiny book called Scripture that once belonged to Leon, and Kim guessed that was the reason it was shining with divinity. Thoroughly sated and obedient like a dog, Melson wondered whether she needed any more help. Kim asked to examine the tent where Lion was staying. When Kim was ushered to Leon's tent, she found it very neat and simple, as if she was showing off that she was a saintess. Out of the blue, Ant's close associate Knight entered the tent inquisitively. He stuttered about those gifts that Kim showered so lavishly, but Kim protested that she even got a scripture in return. However, the associate Knight was worried about something else. With hesitation, he speculated that Kim might be hating the church because of that past incident with the Archbishop. Kim expressed her curiosity about that incident. Apologizing readily, the associate guessed probably Kim didn't want to remember that gruesome day. However, Kim urged him to continue. The knight revealed that when the Archbishop announced Lion as a saintess, Kim threw champagne in his face, and Kim learned that Renee Marquez lived an adventurous life. At that time, Renee had projected that it was all a misunderstanding, not because of the saintess. And then, in a shocking revelation, it was learned that the Archbishop had harassed Renee at some point. Dumbfounded with shock, Kim's hand trembled a little when she learned about the harrowing details. Sadly, people didn't pay heed to Renee's accusations, and the Archbishop's actions were ignored. The close associate tried to confirm with her whether it was all a misunderstanding, but Kim didn't reply to him satisfactorily. Dejectedly, she remarked that everyone had been thinking whatever they wanted and then sweeping the mess under the rug. A person with a bad reputation was never heard. Kim commanded the knight that she would be investigating here alone, so he must wait outside, and the knight complied. Meanwhile, Kim spaced out that in her numerous past lives, she had been dealing with injustice repeatedly. Exhaustedly, she got up thinking that probably she would be dealing with that in the future as well. She realized that at this point facts don't matter since people didn't want to hear a lie. Still, she couldn't trust those words other than Renee's own. And as long as Kim was here, she was inside Renee's body. According to her, nobody was more trustworthy than one's own self. Out of all people, she had to trust Renee, no matter how much accused she was. Even if she really was a villain, it didn't matter to Kim. With a brave front, Kim vowed that if the world saw her as a villain, then she would become a real villain. She secretly assured Renee that she would listen to her. Kim smiled clandestinely that from now onwards, she would never mistrust Renee Marquis. With it, she gestured and a window popped up displaying that the subquest named Clarification had been cleared, since here she had to prove to someone her innocence. Meanwhile, inside one of the tents, an astonished voice echoed trying to confirm Lady Marquis' visit. Inside the tent, Priest Melson affirmed, informing a stranger about the purpose of Kim's investigation to prove her innocence. Priest Melson was very nervous in front of that man. He never thought that the Crown Prince would send that person as his messenger. That charismatic stranger was Sedin Ansala, the one who earned the title of Mercenary King at the age of 20. Sedin was the leader of the continent's greatest guild, the Sira Guild, one of the 2 sword masters in the nation, and has many titles. A jittery Melson thought that a big case like the missing Saintess case could only be investigated by a person like him. Sedin couldn't believe that Renee was here to prove her innocence, and a timid Melson explained that she could have reacted adversely if not given a chance. Sedin was not surprised by Melson's lame explanation because he knew he had accepted a big fat bribe, but still he couldn't believe that Renee came all by herself to investigate. He had always known Renee to be very impatient. He had heard all kinds of absurd rumors about Renee being a spoilt brat. Sedin had this uneasy feeling that something was not right. However, he was least concerned. Sedin stopped Melson from giving any further information to Renee, especially the fact that there was a witness for that incident. When Melson expressed his concerns, Sedin asserted that it was an order from the prince. And then a stranger whispered something cryptic into Melson's ears that went unnoticed by Sedin. While Sedin continued chatting with Melson, it seemed as if Melson was getting dizzy. Out of the blue, Melson passed out, slamming his head on the table to Sedin's surprise. A flabbergasted Sedin jumped up from his seat, immediately thrusting out his sword, while a strange invisible being stared at him intently. As he gazed at a snoring Melson, he wondered if he had taken any sleeping pills, but then he realized that Melson collapsed without any signs of sleepiness. A frantic Sedin couldn't sense any magic either, but gradually a demonic creature embraced him from behind, so instantly Sedin's hand reached out to his sword. The demonic creature was taken aback when Sedin suddenly attacked him with a steely blade. Panting hard, Sedin realized that this was the energy of a dream demon. Feeling dizzy, Sedin tried to keep his balance and thought that even a swordsman like him could barely withstand that energy coming from a high-ranking demon. Sedin couldn't understand who could summon such a powerful demon in a place full of priests, and he was unaware that it was the doing of the Lord of Temptation. Sedin was jittery because he could sense that the summoner was stronger than the Crown Prince. Sedin's past was reflected as he was a war orphan. The only thing that attracted him in this uncertain world was power. Despite being the mercenary of the highest guild in the continent, with immense fame and wealth, he had this insatiable thirst for power. His insatiable thirst could only be quenched with power far beyond that of the Crown Prince, who was the strongest in the continent, but as his thirst grew, he felt emptiness. Drowsily, Sedin came out of the tent and found everyone blacked out, so he suspected that there might be more than one dream demon prevailing around. Hazily, he observed that the strongest energy was coming from the Saintess's tent. His head began to spin, and everything became blurry. Sedin was a little horrified, because he had never felt anything like that before. Terrified, he began to tremble as he realized that something beyond the likes of the crown prince had transcended the human realm, and he couldn't dare harm them. Abnormally, his eyes glowed when he vowed to find out about the supernatural beings to become stronger and be satisfied. Tipsy from sleepiness, Sidin saw something stupefying and let out a faint scream. But as the dream demon whispered a sleepy melody into his ears, Sidin began to falter and then finally kissed the ground to the sleep demon's triumph. Kim was watching the whole scene and wondered about Sidin's identity. Just a moment ago, an irritable Kim was rummaging through the system and found out that the system had concealed half of the stats. Kim was thoroughly annoyed because those remaining stats had to be figured out by her as part of a later quest. Kim discarded that issue since it was not that important, so she assigned the King of Ways and Healing to find the Saintess by using the scripture and learned that it would take a day. Next, she inquired the Lord of Temptation whether he could summon the dream demons without getting into trouble with the priests. The seduction Gramps was flustered since he was greatly ignored by her. Kim smirked as she knew that the Lord of Temptation had affirmed in his way. As the dream demons floated around her grinning, Kim decided to give the priests a nap time. At present, a dashing Sidin snoozed peacefully. Kim watched him, bewitched by his handsomeness. Also, he reminded her of a black cat they used to raise next door. Meanwhile, the King of Ways and Healing had also become one of Sidin's admirers. Next, Kim pinched open Sidin's hazel gold eyes and was mesmerized. According to Vicious Blood, Lord Kim had a blunt way of appreciating beauty. Kim was puzzled by that statement, so Lord of Temptation chuckled that when the dream demons arrived, they saw her admiring faces strongly. Soon a useless chatter broke out. Lord of Temptation sent a private message to Kim, offering their 100 years of eternal sleep in exchange. He got terribly upset when Kim muted him since he boasted of being the best-looking one. Kim screamed at the top of her lungs to release the seduction Gramps, as she felt that the constellation had gone bonkers for using private chat for such trivia. She urged everyone to focus on what to do with Sidin. However, seduction Gramps had despised Sidin since he fell asleep for obvious reasons. Kim was impressed by Sidin's strong stats since it took a long struggle for the dream demons to knock him out. Kim admitted that strength was everything. Seduction Gramps suggested killing Sidin. With a smile, Kim decided to leave the kitten alive since he was quite likable. She observed the dozing Sidin and realized that it was the first time someone didn't have negative favorability for Renee. A startling thought occurred to Kim. She admitted that he was cute and obedient, and King of Waves agreed with her. And based on his favorability stat, it seemed as if he didn't believe in rumors and judged anyone but Vicious Blood sensed an ominous hunch. Kim conjectured that based on his titles, he might have had a lot of knowledge and also didn't have a fear of being bullied since he was an expert swordsman, but Gramps detected a plan. Kim smiled cryptically as she finally made her decision. She declared mischievously that Sidin was hers from that moment. Vicious Bloodlord was speechless, but an amused Kim clarified that she would make him her subordinate. Vicious Blood Leader was not pacified and threatened to throw a tantrum if Kim didn't kill Sidin right away. Next, she inquired Seduction Gramps about anything novel. After rummaging through a surveillance report, a startled Kim came across a witness. Gramps provided her with further information about the witness. Mad with fury, she couldn't believe that the priests hid the fact that there was a witness to the whole case. To add fuel to the fire, they did it on the Crown Prince's orders, so in a fit of rage, she slapped a sleeping Sidin. Kim horrifically realized that she had broken Sidin's nose by mistake. Soon a useless banter began between the constellations, with the two of them glad to get rid of Sidin, while the King of Waves reprimanded Kim for being too harsh. Out of frustration, she muted all of them, but then released the King of Waves to fix Sidin's nose. Leaving him in his peaceful slumber, Kim bid him farewell for the night. In his subconscious mind, a voice kept knocking, telling Sidin that it was time for him to wake up and receive punishment for angering his master. Sidin was baffled at being called Blackie and threatened with being smacked on his buns if he didn't wake up soon. Still in his slumber, Sidin fidgeted uncomfortably while the King of Waves nearly fixed his nose. As he regained consciousness, he wondered why his nose throbbed with pain. He instantly jumped up, thinking about that strange energy. A startled Sidin turned around to find Renee sitting beside him, waiting for him to wake up and playfully tossing the King of Waves in the air. Suddenly, the bubble of the king burst. Sidin was startled to see Lady Marquise in front of him. A warm smile spread on Kim's face. Sedin was still stupefied seeing her when Kim wondered about the acquaintance between them. Sedin mentioned that it was their first meeting, but secretly pondered that Renee seemed different from what he had heard. Feeling uncomfortable with Kim's devouring gaze, the poor lad became insecure and requested her to step back. Kim reminded a perplexed Sedin about the empowering energy. Suddenly, Kim pressed his hand and exclaimed that the energy was hers. At first, a flabbergasted Sedin wondered when Kim put her hand so suddenly, but then he was blown away by that overwhelming feeling. His eyes widened with stupor when it dawned on him that it could be Lady Marquise having that tremendous energy. With a smile, Kim declared that she was the one he was looking for, and Sedin was shocked as he couldn't believe that she summoned those dream demons. Kim mocked him that even though his wisdom stat was high, he was still nuts, and then she asked him whether he was under direct orders of the Crown Prince. Another blow hit him when she called him Blackie, and then Kim sternly grilled him that she knew there was a witness, and she wanted to know the reason for its secrecy. Sedin looked away, claiming his ignorance. However, Kim got dangerously close to him, urging him not to waste others' time since she had already met the witness and learned about everything firsthand. She disclosed the Saintess's doings and the person who ordered to clear all that mess. Next, Kim angrily grabbed his throat, implying the thing that bothered her the most. She was angry because everyone kept it hidden and pretended to be unaware. Maliciously, Kim revealed that Lion left on her own while she was imprisoned unjustly. With a drumming heart, Sedin revealed that the Crown Prince guessed she forced the Saintess into fleeing. Overwhelmed by his obedience, Kim realized Sedin seemed unaffected and wheedled him somewhat affectionately. Out of spite, the two constellations burned in fury while the King of Waves looked admirably at Sedin. Frantically, Kim released his throat and explained to him that the blame on her was based on a logical assumption, but it was false. Rubbing his neck, Sedin reasoned that the Crown Prince was seeing things differently. Kim speculated that the Saintess appeared before the wedding and the evidence was hidden either because the prince might have lost his mind or to save his face. Sedin was still awestruck as he felt that Renee seemed quite changed. He had heard that she had feelings for the Crown Prince, but it seemed that she despised him more than anything, and Kim admitted it. She frowned, wondering how she could develop feelings for a person who falsely accused her. A speechless Sedin lowered his gaze, lost in deep thought. After a pause, he blurted out that he wanted to disclose something to her about the prince and the Saintess. He made a shocking revelation that while they were known as ardent lovers publicly, their engagement was only contractual out of necessity. Angrily, Kim slammed her hand beside him and confirmed her doubt that those two lovebirds weren't actually in love with each other. Sedin giggled nervously when Kim wondered why he became so generous suddenly, but she concurred that everything he said made sense since their engagement was forced. They wouldn't want to be suspected of kidnapping or murdering the espoused. She trembled in wrath when she realized their malicious plan to get rid of her as the only thorn in their side. After learning everything, an exhausted Kim decided to take her leave. Unexpectedly, Sedin grabbed her hand, wondering whether she was a demon, but a stunned Kim corrected him that she was a human. He was interested in Kim reaching such heights with that weak body. He recalled that sinister energy that no human body could possess, as it was not only overpowering, but was very dark, as if harboring some sort of resentment. He wondered what a human body with such a short lifespan went through to get that invincible power. Kim let out a distressing sigh. Then, to Sedin's bewilderment, she spilled the beans that one had to die 58 times to attain that level. She continued that one may have to save a world or two as well, and thinking that Renee must be joking, Sedin remarked that according to rumors, she had never even held a sword. He was curious about why Renee was hiding such immense power that could unify the whole continent. Kim displayed disinterest in this trivial unification. Kim had no idea what Sedin was babbling about as he remarked that she was solely focused on the path of the sword. But then he got up from his bed, making a decision. He dropped a bomb on Kim that from now onward, he would serve Renee as his master. The guy appeared so dazzling that even Kim was dumbfounded for a moment. Soon, Sedin Amsalar was glorified as the one who had achieved countless feats and was called the Empire's Light. Since he had humble origins, he was both loved and hated, but he had only been interested in swordsmanship. Sedin rose to great heights just because he wanted to surpass his limits. Even the strongest Crown Prince was not enough for him. He thought that the Crown Prince was only stronger than him, and the difference in skill alone didn't fascinate him. Very soon he became disinterested in everything as he began to lose sight of his goals. But then a white gold-maned damsel reignited a ray of hope in him. And that lady was Renee Marquis. So when he begged Renee to impart her great teachings to him, his favorability for Renee increased by 200 points. A sudden window popped up in front of Kim asking if she would like to accept Sadine as her disciple, as accepting it will increase her fame and favorability points by 100 each. Kim was indecisive as she couldn't believe the kitten wanted her to be his owner. Kim had lived for a long time but had never taken on any disciple. She felt that life was hard enough and she couldn't bear the responsibility of anyone else. But she wondered if Sadine was worth changing her mind. And then she suddenly made a choice. Kim rejected Sadine's offer and clicked the no option on the screen. Immediately, Sadine's favorability for her decreased by 100 points, and Sadine was greatly dismayed as he thought Renee didn't like him. Aloofly, Kim explained that she liked him, but had her own way of doing things. She startled him by saying that she didn't want to bear the responsibility of anyone and was about to leave when a hysterical Sadine stopped her. An irresistible puppy dog expression appeared on Sadine's dashing face. An astonished Kim couldn't help comparing him to her beloved puppy Cerberus, who was the cutest thing in the world. Also, the King of Ways appealed to her to give that cutie pie a chance. Chuckling secretly but posting a frown on her face, Kim urged him to speak up. Helplessly, Sadine explained his current state of emptiness even after vigorous training, which was not fulfilled even after meeting the Crown Prince. But the void received a ray of hope when he met Renee Marquis. Kim probed him about something that stirred inside him. His hazel eyes displayed ravaging waves of emotions when he looked into Kim's, and the damsel was shaken for a moment. Then he gave the most hilarious example about that infant who was born inside him a long time ago, to Kim's alarm. Sadine amusingly termed that baby as his never-ending desire to win, and he nearly gave Renee a heart attack. With dazzling exuberance, he continued that it was the first time he felt like competing with someone so powerful. Not expecting that outcome, Kim called out to the constellations to rejoice in their moment. However, the King of Waves looked away in dismay. Sensing that he might have displeased Renee, a worried Sadine urgently corrected that he was not only asking her to accept him. On becoming her disciple, he promised that he would support her wholeheartedly. He pledged that he would fetch whatever she desired and obey her every command. Kim was slightly turning towards him since he would have been a great informant, and the vicious Blood Lord happily agreed with her. However, Gramps' seduction disagreed sullenly. At last, Kim gave her verdict strongly based on Blackie's dashing good looks and accepted him as her follower. Sadine's face flushed like a tomato and his eyes glimmered as his favorability for her increased by 200 points. Also, Kim was informed by the system that her reputation would greatly improve if the master-disciple relationship were widely known. Another quest window flashed in front of her, urging her to deepen her relationship with Sadine to the extent she earned 500 favorability points from him and would be rewarded 50 fame points. Sadine thanked her wholeheartedly and addressed her as master, and that sent goosebumps to Kim. Nervously, she requested him to call her my lady like before. Later, while enjoying freshly baked bread along with milk brought by the close associate knight, Sir Martin Kim had a little tete-a-tete with a budding disciple who was ready to answer anything, and that was quite cumbersome for her nerves, but she guessed that happened in all romance novels. Still, Kim probed him further about the prince and saintess, so when she found him unresponsive, she thought he was under the strict order of the crown prince. A warm smile spread on his face as he assured her that he had nothing to hide. Also, he hadn't pledged any allegiance to the crown prince. Sadine was a little concerned that Renee shouldn't be on the bad books of the crown prince for political reasons. Kim was slightly smitten by that utmost display of protection. Playfully, she ruffled his hair as he reminded her a lot about Cerberus, who barked at any random mutt despite his puny size. However, Sadine warned her that the matter shouldn't be taken lightly. Kim assured him that she would worry about that herself, so he should just spill the beans. Soon he narrated the whole incident to her, and Sadine's explanation confirmed Kim's prediction. The saintess Leanne Caris was hailed as the incarnation of the goddess, blessed with the grace of Belua. She was loved by all citizens due to her virtue and divinity. The scheming crown prince gained all the support of the citizens by getting betrothed to her. Also, he ground mountains to keep their engagement intact. For that, he didn't even hesitate to kill. However, in such a situation, the saintess disappeared, and adding salt to the injury, there was a witness who gave testimony that she vanished on her own. Kim expressed her concern that the testimony bothered her. She was told that the youngest priest was the last witness. He was nursing the saintess after she received the divine message that she was mumbling in her sleep, and also mentioned leaving in urgency. Anxiously, the young priest tried to console her that the crown prince would protect her, but the saintess kept on fidgeting with discomfort. She kept on murmuring that she had to leave since it was too dangerous. After that, the priest reported to the crown prince that the saintess escaped while he dozed off. While chomping on the bread, Kim wondered what could be so urgent that made the saintess leave, and since she was a saintess, she could have protected herself with divinity. Since the reason for her disappearance was hazy, the constellations began to give their bizarre reasons, jabbering all at once and creating static chaos. Agitated by the noise, Kim had to mute them down. Offering her some milk, Sedin continued that the crown prince was concerned since he was to be blamed if his soon-to-be bride went missing. He revealed there were other competitors as well, to Kim's surprise. Sedin mentioned Princess Aiden von Landisha, who was practically the only rival and political opponent to the crown prince after the emperor. This came as a shock for Sedin that Renee was ignorant of that fact, so Kim tried to cover up sheepishly that there were some circumstances. Still, she was finding the whole case complicated. To prove herself innocent, she had to find the saintess alive, but that was a tedious job going after someone facing danger since she had her own issues to resolve as well. The wide-eyed puppy dog was heartily moved by Kim's selfless goal. Instantly, she covered Sedin's eyes with her hand, as those always weakened her knees, and assured him that she wasn't as virtuous as he thought. So when he suggested that would immediately clear off the air with those sadistic rumors, Kim stopped him since she was already there to prove her innocence. Still pasting her hand tightly on his eyes, she vowed to take care of the crown prince first. Sedin was curious about her next step, so he gently took off her hand and kissed it lightly, coaxing her to teach him. Impressed by his slipperiness, Kim grinned and suggested having a chat with the prince. Anxiously, Sedin reminded her that the prince never listened to her, so Kim corrected him that she wouldn't be the one doing the talking. Naughtily, she pinched his nose and explained that she believed in taking action. Sedin rubbed his sore nose and acknowledged. Sedin was expecting her to use force since the crown prince was no match for Renee. However, Kim shook her head in agitation. Biting her finger, Kim explained that she would be lightly threatening the prince. Seeking to negotiate with the prince, Kim knew that the prince would ignore her, and breaking into the palace would be dangerous as well. However, she was adamant about meeting the guy who accused her without any valid reason. Creepily, Kim inquired Sedin whether he knew how to pull out a rat from its burrow. When Sedin expressed his ignorance, a fiery Kim suggested that they set their house on fire. As night fell over the holy tents, both Kim and Sedin were traveling in a carriage, and Sedin expressed his concern. He couldn't understand why she was taking him to the Duke's estate. Kim didn't answer, but in reality, she was taking him to fulfill the quest of your royal disciple, in which she had to deepen the relationship with him. She blurted out that she wanted to be closer to him, and the latter was flabbergasted. Stressed out, Sedin reasoned that she didn't need to teach him on purpose, as he could always learn by remaining on her side. Calmly, Kim assured him that she wasn't burdened by him. She wanted him to be on her side so that she could monitor the progress rapidly. Nervously, he fiddled with his fingers, thinking that he shouldn't have accompanied her in the first place. Kim was puzzled by his discomfort, so he explained that she was a noblewoman while he was just a commoner. He was worried that just bringing him along would put her in hot water. Kim couldn't comprehend his concern, so Sedin explained that the nobles weren't thrilled with the commoner swordmaster, especially when the Marcus family was famous for its swordsmanship. He could imagine all the derogatory comments being shot at him by the Marcus family. Sedin disclosed that he refused to become a Marquis and instead chose to remain a knight. So regardless of the circumstances, he was still labeled as a commoner. Kim's face twisted into a frown. She knew that the Marcus family was threatened by Sedin's high-tiered skills, so they were targeting his weakness of arising from humble beginnings. She recalled that many people prayed for her downfall despite respecting her out of fear. She was even manipulated by sugary words and faced betrayal. However, in this world, Sedin was going through treachery. Still, she felt he was worrying about trivial things, as even the priests were rejoicing at her departure. In fact, she thought traveling with a villain like her would tarnish Sedin's reputation, but his glorious reputation made all her worries secondary. Earlier before their departure, everyone was surprised to see Sedin's polite demeanor toward Kim, so even her fame points were increased. She felt that the situation was the opposite of what he was fearing to cause trouble for herself. She reminded him that he was known as the Empire's light, and an abashed Sedin agreed readily. An otherwise nonchalant Kim decided to give him a piece of advice as his senior. Kim intelligently compared herself as being a disgraced noble versus him being an Empire's light, despite being a commoner, so he could never be ignored. Sedin tried to revolt, but Kim pointed at him sharply. She advised him that he must stand tall against all adversities. Comically, she pressed his forehead and coaxed him to keep it straight, or else he would acquire wrinkles, as he must stand up to arrogant people. Immediately, she solved his problem, that he didn't need to worry about those who disliked him since he would be helping her in the future. Smirkingly, she poked his face, imparting him with a piece of invaluable advice to live shamelessly according to his reputation. She wanted him to have the same confidence that she possessed. Weirdly, Sedin felt somewhat better. While she kept on blabbering about how he was her guest, and he had to live shamelessly like her, Sedin pondered that he was right in picking her as his mentor. So his favorability for her increased by 50 points. All the journey, Kim kept on building Sedin's morale, only to be greeted by her doofus brothers as soon as they arrived, to her annoyance. She clarified Sedin's position in front of her brothers, stating that he was there to help her out. Just as she expected, Ant roared at the top of his lungs, reminding her of being the Duke's daughter who came so late at night while bringing a man into the house. Serenely, she retorted whether Ant was deaf or something, and that freaked him out. With utmost gravity, she warned him to fix up his boorish attitude. She blamed him for being a chick who chirped all day. Sheerly agitated Ant couldn't believe that a noblewoman could be that blunt. Not at all intimidated, Kim pointed out that she was tired of putting up an outward clean appearance. Next, she pointed to those so-called obedient maids who ignored her every day. Plus, her restless brothers always seek an opportunity to rebuke her. Wrathfully, she demanded to be treated like a human first. Ant didn't budge and asserted that the fact she was the Duke's daughter wouldn't change. Also, he scorned Sedin for being a commoner, despite being an Empire's light. Ant commanded her to head straight to her room. Kim didn't stop there to Satan's frenzy as she mocked her brother for being threatened by Sedin's remarkable swordsmanship, so instead of fooling around, he must work on his skills. She reminded those empty-headed warriors that Sedin was their guest and they must serve him. Both brothers were left dumbfounded by the family's black sheep. Furiously, Ant reminded her of their challenging position and stated that he sent her to prove her innocence and not to bring strangers. The fierce lioness rolled at the dupe chick that she had brought Sedin to prove her innocence, so he must buckle up his mouth. Flushed with embarrassment, the chick's favorability decreased by 50 points, while an amused Kirill's increased by 20 points. From her previous experience, the lioness knew how to turn hounds into chicks, while the king of ways found the infant chick quite cute. Both the other constellations passed their respective absurd remarks. Not paying any further attention, Kim decided to take her leave while pushing Sedin forward. Raving with anger, Ant stomped his foot in anger, but Kim ignored him, while Kirill's favorability further increased by 20 points. She mentioned coolly that she was busy with a guest, so he could talk to her in the morning if he brought a newspaper or something. Poor Ant kept on sizzling, but an unaffected Kim walked on. Amused and impressed, Kirill thought that the baby sister had greatly changed. Gleefully, he tried to explain that if a king's mercenary was ready to believe in her, then she might be trustworthy and their family name would be saved. Comparatively calm, Ant was lost in his thoughts. Secretly, he clenched his fist, thinking that he already was aware, and that was making him anxious. Creepily, he thought that if Renee was blame-free, then the only suspect would be gone. Fretfully, he didn't know where to find Lian. The next morning was bright and fresh with birds chirping around. Kim fidgeted as the luminous sunlight hit her eyes. She felt that the sunlight was too brilliant. Raising her hand to feel it, she wondered whether it had always been that warm. Previously, she had spent many years in a dark and cold tower filled with monsters. Out of anger, she clenched her fist. She vowed that she would get over this cursed place as soon as possible. As she got out of bed, she wondered whether Sedin was up as well. Fretfully, she knew that she had to take care of him. As discouraged as he may be, Kim decided to give him proper mental training, just like Cerberus. Suddenly, there was a sharp knock on the door. Kim had a passive but uncomfortable skill called superhuman sense that maximized all senses to the extent of instinctively detecting all the surrounding senses. That skill helped her a lot in the tower since it was full of enemies. But living true to its name, she couldn't sleep or eat properly, so a real pain generator it was. When she came to this world, she turned off that skill, and she only sensed Satan's arrival in her tent due to the dream demons. She didn't need it in the mansion anyway, as no one could dare touch her hair. The two constellations mocked her and passed sarcastic comments. However, the King of Ways advised her not to let her guard down. So taking his advice, she turned on the pain generator. Immediately, the knock turned into a ravaging bulldozer. Suddenly, some boorish maids barged in by slamming the door with a sickening thud. Kim knew that those maids didn't like her at all, so inquired about their sudden outburst, and one of them informed her about being summoned downstairs. Kim didn't like the arrogance prevailing in their speech. Still, she patiently inquired about the summoner and the venue. The maids looked at each other sarcastically. Next, they snickered at her foolishness. They mocked her that there were not many people in the mansion looking for her apart from her cheeky brother, always seeking an opportunity to insult her, pretending to be thoughtful about her next step as to what she should do with those irritating insects. Those menial insects tried to remind Renee of her position in the family and even called her the Marcus disgrace. One of them even tried to degrade her in detail, like how she couldn't wield a sword or had an amiable personality and all she was a decoration piece. Kim watched as the house help brutally insulted her to her face. So she predicted that Renee had gone through this a zillion times. Acidly, Kim retorted that some people just act tough because they are more in number. So Kim inquired whether she could buy them off or talk nicely to deal with them. But no matter what, in the end, only power matters. The maids were fully prepared as they pointed out that the young masters had the power and not her. Kim corrected them that they were wrong. And then suddenly she came dangerously close to the most peevish maid and mentioned ominously that she hadn't recognized her power. Out of the blue, the maid gasped, as if to catch her breath, and then coughed madly. She was thrown off guard on the ground, clasping her mouth. Tearfully, she begged Kim to spare her as she couldn't breathe. Instantly, Kim batted her eyelid and whoosh went the breath inside the fallen maid, who began to hiccup and cough in alarm. Next, Kim blew breath of Astaroth to put the maid into a state of sleep. Tearfully, the maid began to waver and then became lifeless. The others began to scream, thinking that she was dead. Indifferently, Kim assured them that she just passed out. Instantly, the other trembling insects learned their lesson as they dropped to the ground, begging for an apology. Stonily, Kim was bored with such a tedious display. King of Ways gave a comforting gaze to Kim. Earlier, she had put on a brave front to Sidin, but in reality, even she had been ignored like him countless times. When she was weak, she was ignored, and when she grew stronger, she leaped toward death. In both cases, she never rested. Kim wondered why those whiny maids were acting so stupidly. She couldn't understand why those who try to harass others do that when they were in no position. But then Kim realized that even she was doing the same thing while the constellations supported her actions. Quickly composing herself, Kim stated that she had a momentary breakdown. Still, she thanked all of them since she had no time to feel down. One of the maids faltered and began to weep. Chill Pill Kim wondered where Ant was calling him, so the maid replied that she had to go to the dining hall fully dressed up. But Kim was not interested in getting duns, so she left, indicating the maid to take care of the weepy willows. With a satisfactory smile, Kim pondered that if the word got out, at least she wouldn't be bothered by those creepy crawlies anymore. So when the King of Ways commented that she solved the issue peacefully, Kim smirked that she was more lenient than in her previous life, and then as she opened the door, she found Sidin. Chirping merrily, she remarked that the stray cat was already here. However, with a melancholic look, he explained that he felt fierce energy from her room, so he came to check on her. Kim realized that he was on a different level from her insensitive brothers. Sidin was concerned about her well-being. She wondered whether he would judge her for treating commoners harshly. When Satan was puzzled, she reasoned that everyone seemed to blame her for everything. Sidin couldn't believe that Renee had been treated so shabbily all along. Gloomily, Kim lowered her gaze as if trying to hide her emotions. But she quickly maintained her composure, stating everything was fine now. She informed him that Ant was summoning them. With a warm expression, Sidin affirmed. Meanwhile, at the dining hall, a wrathful Ant plunged a butter knife into a newspaper. Mad with fury, he demanded an explanation from Renee's side. An article displayed the testimony of the only witness of the Saintess missing case, and also Renee's name was mentioned for raising suspicions against the prince for hiding the witness. Kim was least affected as she kept on eating. She reprimanded Aunt for being too noisy and wondered how she could explain that piece of news. Unbrilly Aunt mentioned the article, but coolly Kim suggested he read the facts himself. When Aunt lost his temper, Sedin rose from his seat to calm him. Exhausted, Aunt gave in and dropped back, reprimanding Kim for raising suspicions against the crown prince without thinking about their family's honor and their father's position at the palace. Casually, Kim addressed her brother while cutting a piece of meat. She commented that he was being sensitive since he was hungry, so he must eat first, but Aunt refused. Playfully, she assured him that she would prove her innocence and highlighted the priest's testimony, whose name she forged herself, Otidi Etna, from Idiot Aunt. Aunt wondered about the credibility of the testimony. However, Sedin wasn't sure because there might be a reason for the prince to hide it. Aunt found that quite strange, since he heard that Sedin was working for the crown prince, but now it seemed as if he had turned his back on the prince. Solemnly, Sedin mentioned that he had not pledged allegiance to the prince and was only acting as an imperial knight. Aunt looked at him sharply, wondering whether leaking evidence to his sister was an imperial duty. With a steely gaze, Sedin wondered whether the Duke was worried about a commoner helping his sister or with the charges getting dropped from her. Instantly, it seemed like a battle between a ferocious hound and a menial chick. However, Renee cheered for her favorite Blackie. Icily, Aunt stated he didn't know that Sedin was friends with Renee, and coldly Sedin replied that he was mistaken since Renee hadn't been his friend. Then he looked at her warmly, declaring that now she was his friend. There was an embarrassing silence. Renee broke the ice and turned to the perplexed chick that it was his turn. Sternly, she demanded an apology from Aunt's side as he was rude to her guest yesterday. Aunt recalled that previously he had called Sedin a commoner. Even Sedin was speechless and slightly abashed. Reluctantly, Aunt apologized to Sedin, terming his previous behavior as a mistake. Humbly, Sedin didn't want him to apologize to him, but mentioned that there was someone else who deserved his apology. Before he could point out an impatient, Renee popped out and stated that Aunt owed an apology to her as well. Bratty brother didn't want to, but the sassy sis declared that he shouted like a gorilla at her. Aunt glared at her, highlighting her rudeness and reminding her that their family was stigmatized because of her, but Renee vexedly claimed that there was no evidence against her. Ominously, Aunt drew out a knife, proclaiming that she became a suspect because of her peevishness. Also, he mentioned that the evidence in the article was insufficient, so he would apologize to her when there was a concrete one. All the three constellations were wild with fury, and they prepared their own ways to punish that impossible Aunt. With lava burning inside her, she knew Aunt had a point. So when the volcano was about to burst out, as she wondered the time that cursed quest would end, poor Sedin tried to cool her off. To ensure you don't miss the unfolding of this romance, get a gentle tap on the notification bell, and I see you on the next tale.